awful, confusing, a hellscape, disgusting.
Disgusting!
These are just some of the words used by the public to describe the Newark Airport Interchange, but they're not all negative. This Redditor described it as strangely beautiful, like wet spaghetti dipped in cyanide strewn across a table. This crazy interchange serves as a connection for many major road networks in the area, and I'm going to use just a little bit of that spaghetti as a starting point for our own custom airport interchange, but it might not be easy. The scope of this interchange is vast. Now, much like building the major airport, we have the challenge of just not having that much space to build on. Make it too big, and we'll have no land left to build stuff on. Make it too small, and it's just going to look a little bit sad and maybe not a good match for a major airport. So what I propose here is a 5-way interchange giving access to all areas and all existing routes, as well as connecting both the upper and lower roads going in and out of the airport. But I'm only going to keep it in the city if I'm happy with the size. If it takes up too much land, then it cannot stay. This will not be a remake of any existing interchange. We need to get creative and come up with something completely new. Can we pull it off? Let's find out. So to give you an idea of the scale of what we're looking to do, we want to give access to this area here, also this area around here, and the third area along this side. This fourth area is going to be reserved for future development. I've got a pretty good idea what I want to do with that, but I don't think that will be coming into play for quite some time. So we're going to leave that well alone for the time being. So this view here is going to give us a much better idea of exactly what land we have to build on. So I think when you start these big projects, it can be a little bit overwhelming, and sometimes it can be difficult just to kind of figure out exactly where you're going to start. So what I would recommend is just get a bit of an idea in your head exactly how you're going to approach things. And what you need to do really, if you're making an interchange, is you need to know where your connections are going to go. And you're not going to know where your connections are going to go until you get your roads in. So there's a choice to make at the beginning. Do we want to build down or do we want to build up? So given that we have elevated sections on this project already, any decision to build up and over those sections will involve some really substantial ramp work. Taller ramps are longer, and longer ramps require more space. And space is at a premium here, and again, that's one of our main considerations. We're kind of trying to keep everything compact. Now the second highway that I'm building below, I am simply just going to run that off into the distance. What the plan is eventually, once we've got the interchange built, is to really just terminate them directly into the district itself. So it can run straight into an industrial area, for example, and that can be the main arterial that's going through that particular district. So placement's important for this. We need to make sure that there's enough space both sides of that lower highway that we can connect our ramps to. And there's going to be quite a number of ramps, because remember, this is a 5-way interchange and we've got extra roads to connect going in and out of the airport. If we don't leave that space, we will absolutely run into trouble later on in the build. So with these things, there can be a little bit of trial and error, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. My very first connecting ramp is going to get deleted right now, and yep, there it goes. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. A little bit of trial and error at the beginning, and it's easy enough to delete, of course, as well. And it's cheap. It's not exactly going to bankrupt the city, right? So here, what I'm going to do is split off a double loop system here, coming from the lower highway onto the entrance of the airport. Again, remember, we essentially have two entrances. We've got the elevated section and the lower one. So definitely a little bit of a challenge trying to get both of them in. And for that reason, I thought it was probably best to get them in first. So we just used a tried and tested technique of just adding an extra lane and then running our on-ramp directly into that extra lane. Once it's in place, we just downgrade the road directly preceding it, and you normally end up with a nice smooth connection. So here we've relocated that right turn from Highway 1 to Highway 2, and makes a little bit more sense. Get loops in first, and then we can get the outer right-hand turns put in place. Now, elevated sections are tricky. There's no way around it. They quite often give a real janky connection from the elevated section, and it's not going to be any difference here. Now, one compromise that I am going to make is I am going to accept a little bit of jankiness on these interchanges. I think if you're making some really large ones, then there's no excuse to have janky sections. You've got all the space in the world. If you're trying to make these really complicated, complex ones, it can be super difficult as it is, but the issue that you kind of run into is that the nodes are just really close together, and what can happen is they can kind of sometimes bunch up and you get that little bit of jank. But we are going to keep it to a minimum, and we'll do our very best to make it as smooth as we can. Now, I did get into trouble from my editor for constantly deleting things and redoing them when they didn't have to be redone, but as I told him, they do have to be redone. I'll accept a little bit of jank, but I won't accept a big bit of jank, certainly not when it comes to the roads. And speaking of jank, we're using a little bit of Move It here. It's quite easy to ruin your networks with these things, so I do try and keep Move It usage to an absolute minimum. I'll use it more for adjusting the heights of the nodes and the segments. If I try and mess about with the, with the curvature of the ramps and the highways too much, I end up just ruining things. But where it really does come into play is adjusting just the fine adjustments on the heights when we have a little bit of a tight squeeze on the ramps. We've got Anarchy on, of course, which is going to enable us to really kind of stack the roads quite close to each other, and then we can kind of just fine adjust it to the minimum heights. Another tip I'd give you guys if you are trying to build your own sort of creation like this is to try and kind of base it off something that's existing already. And I don't mean go out and copy it, and there's nothing wrong with that. I do that all the time, and it works really well. But what I mean is maybe pull up something that you've built before, or something that you see on Google Maps, or whatever's easier for you to follow the flow of the traffic with. Even grab an image and maybe write the directions on it. The more incoming and outgoing roads you have, the higher chance that you're going to miss a connection. And we've all done it. I've done it myself, that's for sure. And there's nothing more frustrating finishing the thing and then realizing you've missed a connection. And even more so if you've made a video and put it out. Not that you would see me ever doing that, of course. But my point is, try and make it easier for yourself if you can. Use the tools that you've got, use the resources that you can find, and get them out in front of you when you're doing your build. So I ended up grabbing one of my own interchanges. It was the Free Flow Park Law. There's a vanilla tutorial for that, I believe, on the channel. It's pretty cool. Essentially, this is going to be taking some elements of that, and it's going to be squished and sort of contorted to try and fit the network that we have. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to essentially just tack a trumpet interchange onto it, which is what we're looking at right here. And we're going to have some funky roads connecting it all together. Now, that's really the kind of brief outline, and you can see it's come together pretty quickly actually as well. If I remember correctly, getting this build done was about 2.5 hours before I started to try and make it look a little bit better, and that's just for the main roads I'm talking about. And that's wild when you think about it really. When I first started playing this game, I couldn't make an interchange, didn't know what the hell I was doing, I'll be completely honest with y'all, but a little bit of practice goes a long way. And I guess that's the same with everything in life, isn't it? If you just concentrate and put the hours in, eventually you'll get to the level that you want to be at, right? So there's a thing called the 10,000 hour rule, and it kind of suggests that 10,000 hours of deliberate practice is key to achieving expertise in any field. Now, I don't know how much credence to give that particular rule, but I'm 2,000 hours now into Cities Skylines 2, so I've got some way to go. But I am interested how much time you guys have sunk into it as well. So do me a favour, if you play the game, jump onto Steam, have a look at your hours, let me know in the comments how many hours you've put into it. If you don't play the game, maybe you play CS1 or whatever it is, stick that in the comments as well. If you don't play either, go and find out the one that you've put the most hours in and put that in instead. And I do wonder if we have anybody that's over 10,000 hours on any game, do you consider yourself an expert? I think you've got to at that point, right? But I'd be interested anyway, let me hear your thoughts. So guys, I reckon we have most of the connections in place now, and now it's time to kind of back up and have a quick look and see what we've missed. So there are a couple of key connections missing, and it's specifically on the exit roads coming out of the airport. We don't really have a good way of turning left here, and we don't have an awful lot of space either. So a very simple solution for that one is the addition of a little U-turn. The U-turn that we're going to put in is going to be after all the other turns on the interchange, and that means that it's actually going to service both the upper exit and the lower exit on the airport, which is ideal. It'll turn traffic back round, and then it can use whatever connection it wants. So with what I think is everything hooked up, it's time to do a quick sanity check. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've put down 6 bus stops. So we've got a 5-way interchange, but remember on the exit of the airport we've got 2 exits. So we'll be using the bus route tool, and we are just going to make sure that we don't have any problems. And straight away on the very first route, I noticed that it was taking a really long way around. So we had a problem over here. I thought it was a kind of janky section going on there. Didn't notice that in fact we have a small section of highway facing the wrong way. So that's going to break our traffic flow 100%. So we'll get that fixed and hopefully we'll be good to go. So let's just check this now. So stretching it out down below, Both entrances are covered. Perfect. Out to area 1, that's 3. Exit 4 and 5 into area 2. Lovely. So we'll check the exit here. We'll check the upper exit first. So into area 1. Lovely. Exit number 2. Yeah, we're good to go. 3. Perfect. 4 onto area 3. Remember, only 4 to check here because we don't have a double entrance to contend with. We're coming from the opposite direction here. Now let's quickly check that lower exit. So we can go into area 1 from here. Go into the exit. Excellent. Second area, yep, that's working. And then the third area. So access all areas, all good to go on that one. And let's just check the entrance as we come into the airport. So we get a simple right turn, which should be pretty straightforward to check. Second right turn, there we go. Does a lower entrance work? It does. Higher entrance works. Excellent, excellent. And again, onto our area 1, that should be a big loop, and that works as well. Fantastic. And a final check from the last one. 1, 2, 3. Oh, something not quite right there. Need to have a look at that again. And the last one is fine. So just having a quick look at that one that didn't look right. The problem was I was clicking on the ramp rather than the highway itself. So we're okay, we're good to go. So we know it works. We're good to go in every direction. We've sanity checked it. Now it's time to make it look like a bit of an interchange, and we're going to use quite a few tools at our disposal. So what we'll do is we'll kick off and we'll basically use the key wall and kind of build it up where it makes sense to build it up. Where you think you might see a concrete wall, we're going to put one in. The key walls will also be used for the barriers on the highway, give a little bit more of a realistic look, I guess, and there'll be a few bits and pieces where it's looking a little janky in terms of the land, so a bit of gentle slope work, some terraforming, and that should look a little bit better. I usually like to add a little bit of concrete, especially where the where the roads meet. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using net lanes. We're going to draw a nice curve, and then we're just going to fill the curve with the surface. You might find that there will be a few gaps within the actual highway, the main highways themselves. So we'll get them filled in rather than having grass. It looks better to have a bit of a darker surface, I should say. Again, those stripes and chevrons pack again will come in really useful here. You need to use a combination of net lanes, to get those chevrons on, and then you can hide the excess parts of it with decals. We'll also use them for elevated sections. So again, what we're going to be doing is using the net lanes. We use the manipulation mode and move it to bring it up to height, and then we can use the same technique using the decals, and we just simply raise them up to move it until we get them at the required height. And again, we'll get it looking pretty good. The last job on the list is just to add a few decals and a bit of scrubbed vegetation, and it will give it again a little bit more natural look, and it should fit into its surroundings that little bit better. As always, I want to give a big thank you to everybody who's watching the video, and a special thank you to our members on Patreon and YouTube. You had me mention about the editor earlier on. That's really only possible with your support, guys. It's super appreciated, and it definitely helps me get a little bit extra content out, or spend a little bit of time on their content itself. Don't forget, if you want to get early access to videos when possible, access to the game saves, all that kind of stuff, it's on Patreon. Check it out, links in the description. But thanks again, guys, it is truly appreciated. So what I'll do is I'll pop on a time lapse, and I'll catch up with you in a minute, and we can take a look at the final product. So it's always nice to kick things off with a little first-person view, especially with these infrastructure builds. Looks really cool when you're driving underneath all of these flyovers, isn't it? I think the favourite first-person view I've done was the Spaghetti Junction one, but I think this journey in and this entrance is probably up there as well. I want to give a good overshot view so you can kind of get an idea of the land that we've got to work on. Now of course what we'll do is those new highways, we can chop them right the way back up to the interchange, and they can just lead directly into new industrial areas that we've got in the upcoming episodes. So the main challenge that we had to contend with was really just limited space, and I think we've managed to make a pretty good job of using what we have available to us. It's always going to be a big road network, it's a 5-way interchange at the end of the day, but I think that is super compact for a 5-way interchange. What do you guys think? Think it's compact enough? Let me know. One thing that I am really looking forward to seeing though is getting more traffic on this thing. I did try and hook it up with traffic spawners just to give you an idea what it's going to look like with traffic coming, in all directions, but the traffic spawners just weren't working for me, so I don't know what's going on there. I need to take another look at it, or maybe just the traffic spawners are broken. I don't know. I've not spent enough time on it, but I'm going to have another look. I've started work on the next episode already. I've got a pretty good idea of what we're going to build, but we're going to have a good bit of space left just on this side of the water. So guys, if you have any ideas, again, let me know. Stick them in the comments, I do read them all. So now that you've seen how to tackle big highway networks with limited space, now you might be thinking that's pretty situational. Well, check out this video from the same city where I create another 5-way interchange.